Hello, welcome back to a Purpose, Profits, and Pixie Dust podcast. I am super excited today to have on our guest, Kimberly Spencer. So, Kimberly, tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and how you got started doing it.
Hey, well, first of all, Lindsay, I love the name of your podcast because, I love profits, and who doesn't love a little bit of pixie dust? In fact, that was my first business when I was 5 years old. I was selling bags of glitter water to my neighbors, split testing price points for 5 cents or $50. So I've been a born entrepreneur. It's kind of been a destiny and a calling. I think that all entrepreneurs are called, and I'm blessed to be a second generation entrepreneur. So I was raised with my parents pushing me around in the stroller as they grew their business. And growing up with my entrepreneur parents, it was very enlightening because I got to see and experience the lack side of growing a business and the abundance side. And compiled with the fact that my father was an addict for 30 years for a majority of my life. And I looked at what they built in 30 years and I said, well, what can I build in 10? And so I've built four multiple six-figure businesses. I had one successful exit from a company that was an e-commerce startup. My first business was a brick and mortar Pilates studio. Second company was an e-commerce startup that I exited from. We pitched at a first round of Shark Tank auditions. We featured in all the major magazines. I then started my coaching company after that when I was on my honeymoon, wondering what do I do after I was bought out 3 weeks before I got married. And then from there, we went and started our agency and have grown from there.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And I love that your family was entrepreneurs as well. So you kind of knew what you were getting into.
A little bit, yes. And there is such a difference with clients who were raised by entrepreneurs and people who are still in the dance and communicating with their family about their entrepreneurial goals when their parents have had 40-year careers. And it's a very different conversation that you have. And that's why I love podcasts like yours, where you are literally allowing your audience to expose themselves to the entrepreneurial way of thinking, because it's very different than being an employee.
Yeah, that's so true. And I know that is something I am still navigating with my family. My dad has businesses, but he also still had the stable full-time job with the benefits, the retirement, and all of that. And so that's a huge mindset shift to be okay, I believe in myself and my mission enough that I'm going to leave all that behind.
And I honestly think, because when we were in Australia, we got stuck there during the pandemic. And I went from being the breadwinner, the primary breadwinner, to the sole breadwinner. And it was during that time that I got to meet with so many entrepreneurs, because there were businesses closing left and right, because we were living in a tourism town. That's where we got stuck, was on the Gold Coast of Australia. And we were there, and I was talking to these entrepreneurs, and they felt so disheartened during that time. And it was so challenging seeing them go from 5 locations to 1 location. And I said, look, you could start an Etsy shop selling God knows what, and you could make it successful because you have mastered the forever skill set of influential conversations. If you have the skill set and the ability to sell, you can literally jump into any career, any industry, because you have mastered persuasive conversations. And that's a skill set that, for me, I see entrepreneurship as the automatic, that's my safety net.
Yeah. I love that you say that, because I won't say I'm not a born entrepreneur, because like you, I had the greenhouse club, the babysitter club, right? Selling the seeds, doing all the things when I was little. However, 9 to 5 job, a high school Spanish teacher. And one of the biggest things for me was a big aha when I was I am still selling kids and parents and families every day in the classroom. It just looks different on the online space. I'm selling them to a new language, to buy into the thing that we are doing, to persuade people to do things. And it's so interesting, because a lot of my clients that I help are teachers, taking those transferable skill sets that people don't even realize maybe they already have, and okay, what could this look like in an online space, and doing something of your own, because a lot of people, it's your mind's closed to it if you haven't had it open to it, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I sell my kids on their home learning every day.
Yeah.
I'm a homeschool mom and that's the benefit of having my own business, but like that I am working with them. I have to pull out all the coaching stops like with my 7-year old. It is no joke. But that experience of being able to say, okay, I see how my 7-year old, he really embraces it when you challenge him and you just give him like I fully believe he could accomplish anything if he wants it bad enough.
Yeah.
And yet he's the type where I have to challenge him a little bit and be like, I don't know if you really can. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. He's the type because that's like me, and I'm like, you tell me I can't do something, I will show you how I can do it, and I will post about it on social media about how I did it and take a picture.
Yes, yes, I love it. I love it. We have that in common for sure. So,
Yes.
what does your agency do now? Because I know you've had these several different businesses. So, if people are listening and they're like, "Oh, I'm curious how I could work with Kimberly," what sort of services do you provide now?
Yeah, so our agency really stemmed out of my coaching business and being stuck in Australia and my primary form of lead generation getting COVID because prior to that, I was doing live events, live workshops, and I got, I not only couldn't do live events because of the pandemic, but I couldn't do live events because of my visa. And so I had to find a way to generate new business and new revenue. And fast forward, I ended up generating over $250,000 in new business revenue just from podcast guesting alone. And so I
Nice.
said, I think we figured out something strategic, and we've helped get our clients booked on some of the top number one entrepreneur podcasts in the world. Like we have gotten our clients booked on some extraordinary, everything from global top 100 podcasts to just, 5% ranked podcasts and getting them booked on the podcasts that really build their brand awareness, but also their bottom line. Because I figured, when having a second baby like I did in Australia, why not start a second business?
Yeah, yeah, I love
It
that.
just makes sense.
Okay, so a lot of our listeners, maybe even all of them, are women entrepreneurs who I know could take advantage of collaborating way more than they do. It is one of those things that I'm like, oh my gosh, friends, like let's do this. So, what are some tips that you have for us on finding? I hear this a lot, like how do I even find the podcasts? What do I say to them? What is some, strategies, some tips that you can give to the listener around that?
So the first thing I can give is a perspective shift. Is a lot of people see the podcast interview as being this visibility moment. And if you think about it from that perspective, I like to equate it to a one night stand versus a long term business relationship. And when you think about who a podcaster is, like you, Lindsay, you're talking to people constantly. You're constantly up leveling your circle and your sphere of influence. That's incredibly valuable for any business owner. That's why I have two podcasts, each with my two companies, with Crown Yourself and with Communication Queens, because the value that comes from me being able to have those conversations with the correct people create conversions. And a lot of people, and there is someone going out there and teaching this, and I can say with full heart and love, never, ever, 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 ever go onto a podcast with the expectation that you're going to convert the host into being a client. That is a very surefire way to land your interview in the trash. Like, I mean, I have talked to some big podcasters.
I've had it happen. It happened this summer, and it didn't happen until after our interview was over. But I'm like, it put such a bad taste in my mouth. I'm like, girl, if I wanted to work with you, like, I'm on your email list, we talked like a year, like, I would have done it. Like, don't pitch me at the end of my podcast interview.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an ick moment. It's kind of like if, the date's going well and then it's like, hey, you want to get married? It's like,
Yeah.
what? Like, I'm sorry. I'd like to get to know you better. And so think of podcasting as like it's a way to open the door to quality relationships, especially if you're targeting the right podcasters. So there are sites like Chartable and Listen Notes that give rankings, and nobody outside of the podcasting industry really cares about rankings, but the rankings do help provide a context for seeing who are the pro podcasters and who are the ones that are just the dabblers. Because 90% of podcasts are not going to be worth your time. 90% of podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes. And sometimes there is a case for having a 10 episode limited series podcast if that's something that you as a business owner wanted to have, that is a valuable asset, that's the asset that you give call to action on podcasts, and you say it's a 10 episode limited series of my best content that really exposes people in your ideal audience to what your offers are. But for the most part, 90% of podcasts, if you're looking to go on them as a guest, are not going to be worth your time. And so we look through making sure that any client that we submit any podcast that we submit our clients to have at least 5 reviews, because basically what we found is generally, if there is, just add a 0 to the ones place, and that's about how many downloads per episode that they're going to be getting within the first 7 days based on the amount of the reviews. Because not often will podcasters want to share their numbers, because kind of sometimes they feel embarrassed, or it's, they don't want to lift up their skirts and show you all the things, but you can kind of have a guesstimate. We also make sure that they publish every 90 days, because that actually constitutes an active podcast. There's over 6 million podcasts on Apple, and only 16% of them are active. So you want to make sure you're submitting to an active podcast. And then on top of that, you want to make sure that the podcaster has produced anywhere between 30 to 50 episodes. And that's the sweet spot for targeting and making sure that the podcasts that you're going on are a quality podcast that's going to be something that you can build a relationship with the podcaster, because they are constantly meeting new people. They are opening up their circle. And a great way to do this is just honestly posting on your social media. Hey, I'm looking to get more visible. Does anybody have a podcast that's around 50 episodes? And then you're going to start getting people in your network saying, hey, I know so-and-so, or I know so-and-so, or maybe this person could work. That's a great place to start. There's other Facebook groups as well. Like we have one with our agency that's Profit from Guest Podcasting, and other free Facebook groups that are like Find a Guest, Be a Guest. Those you do have to qualify. You do want to look through and qualify. And then we also have a free resource. If you want to get it at makeeverypodcastwantyou.com/resources, you can go and get a list of 10,000 emails that are publicly sourced. I have to say that they're publicly sourced, or not private emails, that are of active podcasts that you can submit to based on their category. So that's a great place to start.
Oop, I was muted. That's a great freebie. That's awesome. You gave so much info there. I had never heard that about the reviews, and thinking of my own show, I'm yeah, I think that's pretty accurate actually. Which
it's a good guesstimate.
Yeah, because I don't even remember who it was now, but one of the podcasts I follow for podcasters was recently saying reviews aren't that important. They don't actually, you'll hear podcasters say at the end of their show, rate and review, it helps us get seen. And they're that's not actually true. Do you know if that's true or not? Just curious. And it's okay if you don't know, but.
So Apple came out with a statement last year or earlier this year that said it has no play on the algorithm of reach. However, in the realm of social proof, and when people stumble, the top 2 ways that people find your podcast still are search. And that's why you want episodes in your podcast to have SEO optimization. And for your business owners going on podcasts, if you can pitch yourself with a prospective title that also has a SEO optimized wording for your business, that can drive traffic back to your sites as well, especially if people are searching for let's say certified high performance coach, or someone who helps people with, grow their, or a professional organizer, and you're a professional organizer who helps busy moms. Well, professional organizing for busy moms with so-and-so's name, a lot of podcasts will have it just be your name. But if you can actually SEO optimize and help the podcaster do their job, it makes their job easier. It optimizes their podcast for search results. And the second way podcasts are found is through referral. And so as far as reviews are concerned, the social proof does play a role, and it's it's marketing math anyways, that about 1%, a 1% or 1 to 10% click-through rate of getting that action. In email marketing, it's 30 to 40% open rate a quality open, it's like a good open rate. And then if you can get that like 1 to 3% of people taking action, well, if you have 1 to 3% of your podcast audience taking action, it's a good guesstimate. That's about how many people are viewing it regularly. If you multiply it times 10.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I love that. And thank you for clarifying that, because that's kind of what I thought. I'm like, I don't understand how like the reviews would help you get found, but I do know, like, especially if I find a new show, one, I see if they've published recently. There's been a couple of shows I have found that I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds so interesting, and they haven't published since May or last year, and I'm like, dang it. So I'm like, I almost like don't even like want to start it, because usually if I find one I like, you want to keep it up.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is looking at just like quickly at the reviews, like, and it always kind of surprises me when people don't have very many. And I think it's a good show. I'm like, are they not asking? Like how is it, how is this not playing? But do you recommend for people when they are pitching, one, that they have already listened to the show, and two, if they've left a rating and review? Because I know I have seen before on applications, like, have you listened to the show? Have you left us a review or a rating yet? I mean, obviously, whether they ask that or not, is that something you recommend for your potential guests to do?
Yes. Yeah. Either drop a review like it's hot. Like after this interview, like both myself and our team will leave a review. And if you have a small team of VAs or a small team of employees that are willing to drop a review, that amplifies your interview. I think we were hosting a podcast party last Friday, and we host these free podcast parties once a month. And a podcaster was like, "You are the only podcast guest, Kim, to be personally mentioned by name in my reviews." And I was like, I think those were the reviews my team wrote. But at the same time, like, it gives value and credibility to that episode. It also demonstrates that you've listened, and it also demonstrates that, quite frankly, that you care. Like, a podcaster is, on average, from our basic studies of what we've seen with podcasters, spends anywhere between 1 to 3 hours in the podcast production process, whether it's editing or the interview, or they're passing that off to their producer or their editor or whatnot. So all in all, it's about a 3-hour process just to get 1 hour podcast produced and put out there. You can spend 3 minutes to post an interview. And again, you can go to makeeverypodcastwantyou.com/resources, and you can get swipe files for reviews that you could just copy and paste. So instead of 3 minutes, it gives you 1 minute. So we're going to save you time either way.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. You're like killing it with the freebies. I'm like, that's like the best freebie for that I have ever heard of. I'm like, perfect. I mean, save people time, right? But like,
Yeah.
it always, because I think, so I have a Calendly link that I send directly to people after we've like already chatted. So like me and you. But then I have a form on my website for cold people who, just find me on my website, for them to apply to be a guest. And I have on there, do you agree to promote the show after the interview goes live? And you wouldn't believe the people who say no. And I'm like,
wait, they say no?
Yes, yes, girl, yes. I have it like yes, no as like options. And I'm just like, I remember the first time I saw the no, it was a couple years ago. I mean, I get them frequently. And I'm like, I'm not inviting you to be on my show, right? Like, you just wasted your time. Like, what is the point of that? Because it's good credibility for you as the guest as well. Like,
Yeah.
I love being on other people's podcasts. Like, I put their cover on my website. I link the show. I tell my email, like, because that gives me credibility as well, not only, other people. And I'm just like, I can't.
Oh my goodness. I'm blown away that they would say no. Like, I've heard of, I know a lot of guests say they'll promote and then they don't.
Yeah.
But the fact that people have the audacity to then just say no, like,
at least they're honest. I would rather that, I guess, than people lie and say they will and then they don't.
True. Agree. And like, what the fuck? Sorry, I just don't get that.
I know.
I mean, I really honestly think, and I wrote about this in my book that's coming out on September 30th. Like, if Oprah called, and I've seen this not just with people who say like no. I've actually never had on our applications anyone say no, but I have had people who are like, yeah, I'm going to promote, and then I'm like,
Where did you do
where did you do that?
Yes.
I did not get a tag in any place, and we're pretty good with passing off the
Yeah.
deliverables. But the like, if Oprah called, like, let's just picture like you have a sit down interview with Oprah, and it's like this is like the biggest interview of your life. And then, of course, like any other podcast, it doesn't get released for like 3 months. And then, things happen in life, and your kid loses a tooth, and then you have to fire an employee, and then you have a big month, and then you have to, have more OpEx expenses, and there's just stuff that gets in the way, and you suddenly see an email, oh, Oprah's posted my podcast, oh, that's great. But then you kind of just forget to promote it. I'm like, no one would do that to Oprah.
Yep.
But people do it all the time, not realizing Oprah started brand new too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't do that exact analogy. I love that one, but I have said that all the time to my clients on my podcast even, because another thing that has happened to me as host and as guest is like the people just don't show up. And I'll get an email an hour later, or maybe not even at all. Like I'll email them and be like, hey, I waited for you for like 15 minutes. And they're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to put it on my calendar, whatever the thing is. And I'm like, I bet you if I usually say like Jenna Kutcher, but Oprah is a great example. If I were Jenna Kutcher and I was supposed to be on your show, or you were supposed to be on my show, there is no way in hell that interview wouldn't have been on your calendar. It wouldn't have been color coded. You know what I mean? Like, treat it the same way, right? Like, treat everyone the same way, because you never know. Maybe I am the next Jenna Kutcher, and you're going to wish that you were on my podcast or that I was on your podcast someday down the road, right?
Yeah, I mean, and then you can be like, oh, I knew her when. There are many people that I know that I'm like, oh, yeah, I was friends with her back in the day. And, like you never know where someone's going to go. And so I think just leading with kindness, and honestly, that's where the whole concept and the idea of, well, you just treated a podcaster like a one night stand. Like, great, thanks for the visibility, bye. And then you never see them again. And then they do all this work. And then it's kind of like, oh, I thought this was leading somewhere. Let it lead somewhere in building the relationship. Like, make that podcaster a part of your circle. Like, engage with them after on social media. Pre-promote the episode. Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. Is I'll be hopping on LinkedIn right after this and being like, oh my gosh, this interview with Lindsay was so amazing. We talked all about podcasting, and I'm in shock and horror that people would say no to promoting an episode. On an actual application. That's just absurd to me.
Right.
But at the same time, like, build the buzz for the episode, because that provides you with social proof that you are somebody worth speaking to, that you are somebody who is an industry leader. You don't have to wait until the podcast comes out for you to start leveraging that visibility. And that's a huge mistake that I see business owners make. And that's a huge mistake to profitability. Like, the reason many of our clients are generating revenue even before their podcast episode airs is because they build the relationship with the podcaster. And it's not just revenue from converting a podcaster into a client. Like, we have to think beyond. We think of the podcaster as like a potential golden goose of many eggs versus like, this is my like gold egg of a potential client. And that idea allows you to then build the relationship and have it be in a relationship, just like any romantic relationship. You don't want to be in a relationship with a taker. A relationship with a taker, it sucks. I've been there. But you want to be in a relationship that is one of generosity, of reciprocity, where you are able to give and showcase and share and offer value. And that value does not just have to be your products and services. It can be a referral to another guest. It can be a referral to a book or a resource or a tool, or even just a shout out or a LinkedIn review of, hey, I was just on this podcast and what an amazing speaker Lindsay is. She asked such insightful questions and you're going to want to listen to her podcast. Like, these are very basic tools that just build the relationship up. rather than, I think in the realm of social media, we get so lost in a sea of so many followers and so many friends, and we have thousands of friends, and the concept to our like biological brains is absurd that we have like 5,000 friends suddenly. And so it's like
Yeah.
there's no way we could fit that amount of people in our house, most likely. And
Yeah.
so the concept of developing a one-on-one quality relationship kind of goes out the window. But still, that's the basis that I've built every business on over the past 17 years of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, those connections and that relationship building is really huge. Like, I can think of some of the women who I now call my like biz besties started out with podcast guest relationships where, now we follow each other on stories or whatnot, and we're cheering each other on, or like you said, referring people to other people. And occasionally, sometimes they are offering a product or a service. And I'm like, yes, girl. I've had, some people on for ads, and I'm like, I actually want to hire you because like I need help with this. You blew my mind. You know what I mean? Like, so you never know, but I do think we kind of started this conversation with like not going in with that expectation, but then as the guest or, even as the host, going above and beyond, like that's kind of like what I do with my clients and what my motto has always tried to be in my business. Like, treat people, like you said, how you want to be treated, go above and beyond for them without that level of expectation, has been really beneficial for me in the long run, like for sure.
Yeah. And it's the number one thing that most people are scared of in business. Like having coach leaders for 9 years, people are scared of talking to people.
Yeah.
And of just like, and whether it's, our inner first grader who's hiding in the corner and like scared of not being picked on the playground, it's very easy to hide in processes. It's very easy to be updating your CRM. It's very easy to post on social media and then ghost and oh, I did my marketing for the day. It's very easy to send out an email, but having quality conversations is really where the money is made. And not just in a one-on-one transactional relationship, but it's where you create transformation, and where you can create a relationship that's exponential rather than transactional.
Ooh, I love that. That's definitely going to be a clip for a reel right there. I'm like, note to self. That's definitely going to get pulled out for that. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your book. Will you mind sharing? I'm assuming you have shared the title, so tell us a little bit about what it's about, what we can expect from it, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so Make Every Podcast Want You has been a labor of love. It is like the full title is Make Every Podcast Want You, How to Become So Radically Interesting You'll Barely Keep from Interviewing Yourself. And this this is about not only the why of like the why behind me being an evangelist for guest podcasting, but really looking at if you want to be a thought leader in the next decade, AI is listening to your podcasts, and they are assessing your thought leadership. And as more and more AI videos get pulled out and put out there, you will be judged against these videos. And I think that is where, if you want to establish yourself in the thought leadership realm, according to Jen Trepek, who is the host of the, I think it's Top 1% podcast. It's a salad with a side of fries, but she's also the co-founder of the Podcast Professionals Association. And she said that AI is judging the amount of podcasts that you're going on, the frequency and the breadth. So it's not just about getting on those global top 100 podcasts. Like I was only on one global top 100 podcast until just recently, until this past year. But still, you're able to, there's many ways to profit from guest podcasting that go beyond the scope of just the interview. And
Right.
so it's breaking down not only why podcast guesting works, but also how to tell your story and what do top podcasters look for. And one thing they look for is a level of mastery. They look for mastery. They look for embodied influence. And they also look for things like, we just recently did an email blast to our network and said, we are no longer accepting women who just want to empower women for our podcast. Like, we have a top ranking podcast with Crown Yourself. We've been around for 5 years. And I've gotten so many pitches from women who want to empower women, and not that that's bad. Like I love that, but now it's to the point of how are you actually doing that? Give me some credibility, give me some numbers that show that not only do you want to empower women, because it's 2024, like who doesn't want to empower women? It's kind of archaic. Like if you don't want to, you're kind of in a different century. But now in this space of like I got a pitch from a really phenomenal woman. Like this woman has spoken at the UK and she was a burlesque dancer. And that was not in her pitch, and that was from an agency. And I was like, what? And it's like, no, she's spoken at the UN. Spoken at the UN and was a burlesque dancer as well. I was like, that you are cool. That's so cool. But it's because there's specificity. And empowering women is a very generalized concept. So we go into communication concepts of how do you communicate your message to where you're able to show the concept, but also show the specificity of the actual ways that you've actually impacted, and the actual areas where you have created that ripple, and being able to look at how do you pitch, where do you pitch to, what's the booking process like, so that you're able to have a flow and have it be an ongoing project as a part of your brand awareness and visibility and lead generation strategy. Because in chapter 6, I go into how to amplify your message and your income and your impact from guest podcasting, and it's from creating this ripple. But ultimately, the interview has to be the selling point. Like you have to deliver so much value that the next call to action is a no-brainer, or else if the first date doesn't go well, you're not going in for the second date. So you want to be able to make sure that you deliver something of value, that you're able to serve an audience, that you are able to share your stories in a way that connect and convert. And that's what the book teaches.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I know I'm going to buy it immediately. I'm like, you got one sale. You did convert the host. So there you go, Kimberly.
Yes.
Wasn't the intent, but yes. See, and that's what I mean. Like very natural, very, I don't know how to word it besides not authentic. I don't know, but I hate that word all the time because it's thrown around all the time. But like that is the correct way to do it. So everyone take note. Kimberly is modeling what she teaches right now in this process. I love that. And congratulations. Is this your first book, or have you written other books?
This is my first solo book. So I was a part of an Amazon bestselling collaborative book called The Start, Journey to Entrepreneurship, and was written back in 2015. And so this is like solo baby birthing book. And of course, like any sane person who has Gemini into their 10th house, I decided to launch 2 books in 1 year.
Okay.
Yep. So I have this book coming out, and then I have, because I'm a boy mom of a 7 and a 3-year-old, I have a children's fart book coming out. And the reason why it's called It's Just a Fart. And the reason why I'm doing this as well is because in the book, Make Every Podcast Want You, I say one of the tenets of becoming an interesting podcast guest is have an interesting life. Like do cool experiences, do different things, do things that are weird. And I cannot tell you how many people are like, oh, crown yourself, communication queens, wait, fart book? And it creates this paradigm and perspective shifts that they don't really expect, but it actually lands and keeps it in your memory.
Yeah.
So if you do something that's off or weird, like one of the questions that we have for onboarding our clients is, what is something weird or quirky or different or special or unique that's something that like no one would really know about you unless you shared? And I can't tell the amount of amazing responses I've had that have thus humanized our clients, some who are incredibly successful, having built $100 million to $1 billion companies. Like that humanization, it opens up doors that most people think, to people that sometimes there can be a barrier where you're like, oh, they've accomplished so much. Oh, it was good for them and they must have not had all the hardships. But when you can add those quirks and those funky, weird, cool, interesting things where you have an interesting life, it makes you a really interesting guest.
Ooh, I love that. Now I'm like thinking of the ways that I can like ask that question. Like maybe even ahead of time so that I can like prep myself for that answer. You know what I mean? Like on my pod, I'm like, I think I'm adding it.
Yes, definitely.
It's super fun. Yeah, it's super fun. And I actually noticed on your media kit that you said you were Miss Congeniality. I was also a Miss Congeniality of the Corn Festival in South Siena.
What?
Yes, that's like one of my fun facts. So we also have that in common. We're both pageant queens.
I love meeting a fellow pageant queen.
Yes.
Pageant queens was like the first place that I found my people.
Mm,
Like, in high school, I was the weird person who had like all of these ambitions and I wanted to change the world. And I think in my senior class president speech, which I didn't win, but, I'm not still
I-
bitter at all. No, I'm not. But I had basically put in the plan to eradicate homelessness and hunger from LA.
yeah,
We're still working on that one,
yeah,
but
yeah.
but the like when I found beauty pageants when I was 15, and it was at the time where I was battling bulimia, and people think like, wait, you were fighting an eating disorder and then you were doing beauty pageants? Wasn't that actually worse for you? I was like, no, because
Yeah.
I found a group of women who were successful, who were ambitious, who were beautiful, who cared for their bodies, and who wanted to make a good impact in the world, and who wanted to make a lot of money, and who wanted to build something of worth and of merit that served other people. I was like, and we got to wear crowns and ball gowns. Like, I'm sold. Like that's those done.
Yeah. It's so interesting you said that because that's kind of how I felt when I went to college. And people have all sorts of notions about a sorority. And when I rushed and I found my sorority, and it was just like a breath of fresh air, and I got involved with things on campus. Like it was so nice to leave behind the stereotypes or like this is how you've been your whole life in high school and like get to kind of create your own, new thing. Yeah, so I relate to that so much, but I just thought it was funny because I've never met a fellow Miss Congeniality. So I'm like, well, here we go. There's both of us on the same podcast at the same time.
Magical. I love it. Yes. And I mean, Miss Congeniality I even mentioned it in my book about like how to get booked on podcasts. Like, I campaigned for that title.
You do? Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it.
I
I love
did.
it.
But I
Okay.
also said, like, I did it genuinely and was like, hey, I want to befriend you. I'm a nice person in general. Like, let me
Mhm.
help you. And by the way, I'd really love to win this scholarship. So
Yeah.
if you're open to it, vote for me. Like, either way, I'll still lend you my curler. Like, but just being able to just be open and genuine with what it is that you want, I think that's a huge piece of the expectations too. Is so many people hide their expectations, and I've seen this with podcasters when they do pay to play. When they're a pay to play podcast, is they hide the expectation of, oh, you're booking, you're booking, you're booking. Wait, oh, now it's $100 to do your interview,
Yeah.
and they hide that behind the process. And A, that's iffy with the FTC, but
Yeah.
B, that is you want to be upfront with that. Just be
Right.
if you have a pay to play podcast, be upfront, be honest with it, and just be aware that sometimes with pay to play, it does create transactional relationships from the get-go rather than actually looking at the transformational or exponential possibilities that can come from the relationship, because you
Yeah.
never know who someone knows.
Yeah. That's so interesting you brought that up because I didn't even think about that when we were talking podcast, but I've told some of my client, I'm like, they've reached out to me about not only for that, but sometimes pay to play for like summits is becoming more of a thing. And as a summit host myself, I'm like, I can get where they're coming from if they are using the money for ads or things like that. But I participated in one this spring, sometime winter. And I paid for it. It was the only one I've ever paid for because the event last year was like 7 or 10 women. It was a huge mailing list. I was like, okay, yeah, pay to play this time. Well, then this event this year, she had, I think there was 70 of us split up. Like it was just, and I'm like, you just made money off of us as the speakers because 70 people times, I think it was $200 or $300. I'm like, and no ads, no anything. And I'm like, that's not cool. Like, I'm not down with that. So I didn't apply for it next year. And I will not probably, I don't want to say never because, but I'm like, it just put a bad taste in my mouth. Like I said, like, don't profit off the speakers, like profit off the ticket, because then there was also tickets for the VIP sales and all that. But anyway, I wish it more of that would have been disclosed up front, like this is the amount, but and there are still 7 speakers or there are 10 or whatnot. And I'm like, at this point I'm paying, and like I don't even know if anyone's gonna like 70 speakers to pick to listen to my 30-minute thing. Like it would take
That's a
people,
lot to choose from. Yeah.
yeah, it would take people months to get through it if they did listen to all of them, in their free time. So anyway, I'm not sure how I feel about, well, I can tell you how I feel based off of
I can kind of tell how you feel, Lindsay, by your reaction. Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen that consistently because I know in the speaker circuit, like with live speaking, there's the pay to play. And I think
Yeah.
that and I see it have value in the live pay to play because it's different than online.
Yep.
Like you have to consider the medium. Like in a live pay to play, people aren't going anywhere. Like they're
Right.
stuck in a room.
Right.
Like they're not. So you have a much more higher probability of converting an audience member than somebody who is, when they're listening to a podcast or they're listening to the summit, they're probably doing other things in the background of their life. In fact, more often, especially with podcasts, they're driving, they're taking the kids to school, they're doing their dishes, they're doing their laundry, they're doing other things. And so your interview has to be captivating in a way that engages and it understanding the medium. And that's why with pay to play podcasts, I'm not a big fan. I've actually never done a pay to play podcast.
Yeah.
And we've had some clients who we've gotten on some podcasts that were pay to play and they chose to invest in it because that's not part of our services. We'll pass off the offer to them, but it's up to them if they want to pay for it. I, though, have never seen any revenue come from those podcasts typically because it is a transactional relationship initially. And I think like you said, like with 70 listeners, it's like 70 speakers, like that's too many for our unconscious minds to even process. And if it's like 3 to 5, that's a very targeted, engaged, like you're going to choose one of 3 or 7 people, but 70, that's a lot.
I know. And I remember looking at my download numbers for the freebie that I offered at the end. And it was like lower than any of the other summits that I've been a part. And I'm just like, oh, that just like really sits bad. But anyway, live and learn, right? We'll do
Live and
anything
learn.
once, and then we learn from it.
And I think that's, I mean, the one thing that we can do is we can bring this knowledge and awareness and the lessons into the business sphere to support our clients and our audience and our listeners with making sure that, hey, here's the mistakes that I made, totally transparent. I probably wouldn't do this again, etc. Like I've done pay to play live speaking gigs and it just depends on what the audience is. It really is contingent upon who the audience is, what the other speakers are, and how much does my talk differentiate from the other ones. Because when it differentiates and you really stand out, then it can be a high converting asset basically for your business. But if it's one of 70, that's not. I did a live event that was one of 70, so I completely feel you.
Gosh, yeah, live event 1 of 70 is crazy too. But at least with the live, like you said, hopefully there will be some people, but then again, depending on how the conference was set up, if it's different rooms running simultaneously, you never know when people are going to, pop in. And yes, some of it is on our shoulders of, like you said, pick a compelling topic, be the person who stands out. But I've been a speaker at some before, where I was speaking on branding and then there were like 2 other people doing branding talks. And I'm like, well, I know mine was awesome for the people, but sometimes, when people are like, well, I'll do a branding one at this time because, there's a conflict and whatever. So yeah, it can get a little tricky, but I'm glad that you don't love the pay to play podcast either. Cause and even just as a podcaster, like, yes, I have expenses, but hopefully my show and my ads and my things that are promoting like myself on my solo episodes are enough to cover those sorts of things, so that I don't need to do that really. But
yeah. And I think, if you're looking to start a podcast, have a business strategy behind it. And if your business is in a place where you are struggling financially with revenue or with profit margins, then it's just kind of like if you're struggling in a relationship, it's not the time to have a baby. Like a podcast is birthing another project baby into your business. Like not the time. Get clear on revenue, get a revenue strategy in place, and get your profit margins up to a place where you have some buffer, and then start a podcast.
Ooh, I love that. Love that. Okay, that is a great place for us to wrap it up today because everyone's going to need to go buy your book. So, Kimberly, tell us all the places, and I will be sure to link these in the show notes. What's your maybe like top 1 or 2 places that you hang out on social or LinkedIn or whatnot? And then remind us again the name of your book and what day it comes out so that we can all get it.
So the top place I hang out on social is on Instagram, and you can find me just personally at Kimberly.Spencer. And if you love this podcast episode and you want more podcast strategies, you can listen to the Communication Queen podcast. Or if you want more tips for leveling up your leadership, the Crown Yourself podcast has been around for 5 years, going on strong, and now award nominated, which I'm super excited about. And then our book, my book, Make Every Podcast Want You, is coming out on September 30th, and International Podcasting Day. Had to land on the date.
Yeah.
So go to makeeverypodcastwantyou.com, and that's where you can buy the book.
Awesome. All right, Kimberly, great. I love this so much. This was such a great interview, so much great info. Everyone's going to go back and listen to it several times, I'm sure. And I just really appreciate you and your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. I so appreciate you as well. Thank you.